to financial freedom and correcting your status in the system.
Midwest EDU focuses on educating individuals about practical steps like managing debt, building savings and investing strategically. Key principles include financial tools like trust, bonds, and legal instruments to protect and grow assets, correcting your status in the system. This involves reclaiming your legal and financial identity within governmental and financial systems. Understanding your legal status, correct legal documents
Like birth certificates and social security records.
to align with your preferred status. Steps code begin. Educate yourself. Attend workshops, read relevant materials, and network with like-minded individuals. Assess your current standing, understand your debt, credit status, and legal documentation. Take action, start correcting your status through affidavits, trust formations, or A9 applications while building a financial foundation. Plan for long-term freedom. Focus on investments, business, ventures, and creating generational wealth. Midwest EDU's approach empowers individuals to break free from financial and legal constraints, ensuring they live a life aligned with their goals and values.
What it do, Midwest in the building on mamas. What's the word? What's the word? What's the word? Peace to the gods, goddess, kings, queens, whatever you call yourself. What it do, what it do, what it do. Read with me. We finna let this book play. Y'all need to go grab that book. King of the Trades off Amazon Kindle. Go get that book, King of the Trades. Here we go.
Chapter 1. The Call. Hammett had always been a light sleeper. Years of keeping one ear open for the slightest sound, the faintest threat, had conditioned him to wake before the second ring. But this call hit differently. It didn't just rouse him from sleep, it shook his whole world. His phone buzzed on the nightstand, the faint glow casting long shadows across the sparsely furnished apartment. The sound sliced through the quiet like a knife. Hammett grabbed it, squinting at the screen. It was Vic. Hammett hesitated for half a second before answering. "Yeah," he said, his voice rough with sleep but alert. Vic's tone was frantic, almost incoherent. "He's gone." Hammett sat bolt upright. "What the fuck you mean he's gone?" "They shot him." "Bro, they shot him, Demeter's dead." Vic's voice cracked, and Hammett could hear the chaos in the background. Voices yelling, sirens wailing, the distant hum of Chicago traffic. Hammett's heart stopped for a moment, then slammed against his chest. Where? How? Who the fuck was with him? It was me and Idy Rib. We was leaning against the whip, just kicking it. Demeter was talking about some business moves, and out of nowhere, this dude from the other side walks up and starts dumping on him. No warning, no nothing. Hammett's grip tightened on the phone. "Y'all ain't have no bangers on you? Nobody else strapped?" Vic's pause said everything. Idy had his, but it happened too quick. Demeter was just gone, man. "Fuck!" Hammett yelled, slamming his fist against the nightstand. The lamp tipped over, crashing to the floor. His voice dropped into a dangerous growl. "Who was it?" "We don't know yet. Dude got away, but we think it's one of Bishop's guys." "Shit's hot right now. I don't know what to do." "You don't do shit," Hammett snapped. "Stay the fuck where you at." "I'm on my way." Without waiting for a response, he hung up, threw on a hoodie, and grabbed his keys. His gun sat on the counter, a sleek black Glock, wiped clean and ready. He tucked it into his waistband, grabbed a small bag, and stormed out the door. The highway stretched out before him, the Chicago skyline a distant memory. Milwaukee had been a fresh streets were calling him back. His mind raced as he pushed the car to its limits, weaving through the late-night traffic. Hammett's thoughts on the road the drive gave him too much time to think, and the memories hit him like a freight train. Demeter wasn't just a friend, he was family. A brother. They had grown up in the same trenches, survived the same wars, and built something out of the ashes of their lives. Demeter had always been larger than life. His laugh, his swagger, the way he commanded respect just by walking into a room. He wasn't just a leader, he was the leader. Hammett couldn't count the number of times Demeter had pulled him out of a tight spot, had his back when no one else did. And now he was gone. Hammett's grip on the steering wheel tightened, his knuckles white. Whoever did this was going to pay. But a deeper unease gnawed at him. Why was Demeter out in the open with no real protection? How did someone get the drop on him so easily? It didn't add up. By the time Hammett crossed into Illinois, his mind was made up. He wasn't just going to find out who killed Demeter, he was going to dismantle every motherfucker involved. Arriving in Chicago, the South Side greeted him with its usual chaos. Even in the dead of night, the streets buzzed with activity. Corner boys hustling, police cruisers patrolling, the distant rumble of bass, heavy music. Hammett pulled up to the spot where Vic and Idy Reb were waiting. The two of them looked like ghosts, their faces pale and drawn. A bottle of Hennessy sat on the hood of the car, untouched. Hammett, Vic started, but Hammett held up a hand. "Don't say shit yet," he said, his voice low. He glanced at Idy Reb, whose usual wild energy was muted. "You had your piece on you, right?" Idy nodded. "Yeah, but it happened so fast, man. I ain't even see dude coming." Hammett's eyes narrowed. "And Demeter? He didn't have his on him?" Vic shook his head. "Nah. He said we wasn't gonna need it tonight. Thought it was just a chill night." "Chill night," Hammett repeated, his voice dripping with sarcasm. He paced in front of the car, trying to piece it all together. So dude walks up, starts dumping, and just walks away? Nobody saw him? Vic and Idy exchanged uneasy glances. "We didn't get a good look," Vic admitted. "But word is, it might have been one of Bishop's guys." Bishop. The name hung in the air like a curse. Hammett's jaw clenched. Bishop had been a thorn in their side for years, a rival who always seemed to push just far enough without getting buried. But this was crossing the line. Hammett turned to Vic and Idy, his eyes cold. First thing we do is find out who this motherfucker is. Then we make sure everybody knows 63rd don't play." Chapter 2, King of the Trades. The South Side of Chicago had always been a proving ground, a place where only the strong survived, and the weak were swallowed whole. For Hammett, the South Side wasn't just home, it was a battlefield, a crucible that forged him into who he was. But before he became Hammett, the enforcer, and before Demeter became the king of the trades, they were just two kids navigating a world that didn't give a damn about them. The meeting Hammett was 15 the first time he met Demeter. It was a sticky summer afternoon on 63rd Street, the air thick with the smell of fried food, sweat, and asphalt. The block was alive with energy, music blasting from car stereos, kids playing tag, and hustlers holding down their corners. Hammett was leaning against the corner store, watching it all with a quiet intensity. He didn't talk much, but people knew better than to test him. Demeter pulled up like he owned the block, even back then. 6 feet of muscle, his low fade crisp, and his presence commanding. He wasn't just some loudmouth looking for attention, he moved with purpose, his eyes scanning the block like he was already in charge. Hammett noticed him immediately. "What's up with you, shorty?" Demeter asked, his voice smooth but probing. He had a habit of sizing people up, testing their mettle before deciding whether they were worth his time. Hammett didn't flinch. "Ain't nothing amused." Most kids his age would have stammered or looked away, but not Demeter's attention. "You got heart," Demeter said, nodding. "I like that." Hammett shrugged, keeping his expression neutral. He wasn't about to give this dude the satisfaction of seeing him sweat. From that day on, their paths were intertwined. Demeter didn't need to test Hammett any further. He already knew he'd found someone he could trust. And Hammett, for reasons he couldn't quite explain, felt a pull toward Demeter's raw charisma and vision. The formation of the crew. Demeter had been building his crew for months, carefully selecting the right people to ride with him. He wasn't looking for just anyone. He wanted soldiers, people who would fight for him, bleed for him, and help him turn the Trays into a force to be reckoned with. Hammett was the final piece of the puzzle, but the foundation had already been laid with Vic, Ty, and ID-Reb. Vic was the talker, the dude who could smooth things over or stir shit up, depending on what the situation called for. He had a knack for reading people, knowing exactly what to say to get what he wanted. But he wasn't all talk. Vic could throw hands when it came down to it, and he had a sharp mind for business. Demeter had met Vic at a dice game where Vic had talked his way out of losing a few $100s. Instead of getting mad, Demeter was impressed. You could sell water to a fish, he'd said, recruiting Vic on the spot. Ty was the quiet one, the shadow in the corner who only spoke when he had something important to say. He wasn't flashy, but his loyalty was unmatched, and his calm demeanor hid a fierce temper. When Ty fought, it was like watching a storm, silent but devastating. He'd grown up with Demeter, their bond forged in the trenches of 63rd. If Demeter was the king, Ty was his silent blade. ID-Reb, if Ty was the calm, ID-Reb was the chaos. He lived for the thrill, the adrenaline rush of the streets. ID was the type to start a fight just to see how it ended, his unpredictable nature both a strength and a liability. But beneath the wild exterior was a deep loyalty to the crew, especially to Demeter. ID had earned his spot in the crew by taking out a rival almost twice his size during a block dispute. When the dust settled, Demeter had pulled him aside and said, "You're crazy, but I need crazy on my side." The first test, not everyone was happy about Demeter's rise. The block had its own power players, and Demeter's crew was seen as a threat. The first major test of their loyalty came during a turf dispute with the Southside Hitaz, a rival gang that controlled the dice games on 63rd. The Hitaz weren't about to let Demeter take over without a fight, and tensions boiled over one summer night at a street party. It started with words, trash talk, and thinly veiled threats, but quickly escalated into a brawl. Hammett, new to the crew, had been watching from the sidelines until one of the Hitaz swung on Demeter. That was all it took. Hammett waded into the chaos like a wrecking ball, his fists flying with precision and fury. He dropped one dude with a single punch, sending him sprawling into a stack of crates. Another tried to tackle him, but Hammett sidestepped and slammed his elbow into the guy's jaw. Vic, Ty, and ID-Reb held their own, each bringing their unique energy to the fight. Vic used his quick reflexes to dodge and counter. Ty fought with brutal efficiency, and ID-Reb, well, ID went wild, taking on two Hitaz at once with a grin on his face. When the dust settled, the Hitaz were either unconscious or scrambling to retreat. Demeter stood in the center of the carnage, a cut above his eyebrow but otherwise unfazed. He looked at Hammett and nodded, a faint smile on his lips. "I knew you had it in you," he said. From that day forward, Hammett was more than just part of the crew. He was Demeter's right-hand man, the enforcer who made sure the block stayed in line. Building the Trays with the crew solidified, Demeter began expanding their influence. The Trays weren't just about hustling or fighting, they were about control. Demeter understood that power came from respect, and respect came from strategy. He started taxing local businesses, offering protection, and Mr. Ali refused to pay, calling them young fools and threatening to call the cops. Demeter didn't respond with violence. Instead, he sent Hammett, Vic, and Ty to talk to him. Hammett leaned on the counter, his voice low and steady. "We ain't here to hurt you, Mr. Ali. We're here to protect you. You know how things go around here. Pay us, and we may Finally, he nodded. Fine. But if you boys cause me any trouble, Hammett smiled, a rare thing. You won't regret it. Within months, the Trays had turned 63rd into their stronghold, their reputation spreading across the South Side. They weren't just a gang, they were a movement. And at the center of it all was Demeter, the king of the Trays, with Hammett, Vic, Ty, and Idy-Reb at his side. Chapter 3, The Rise to Power. Demeter's vision for the Trays was simple: control the block, own the streets, and create something that couldn't be taken away. But the climb to the top was anything but simple. Every corner, every hustle, every dollar earned came with a price, and Demeter's crew was paying it in blood, sweat, and raw determination. Expanding the territory, the first step was solidifying their hold on 63rd. The block was the Trays' foundation, but Demeter wasn't satisfied with just one corner. He wanted the neighboring blocks, the alleyways, the dice games, the small businesses. He wanted everything. Demeter called a meeting in the back of the barbershop, their unofficial headquarters. The room was dimly lit, the smell of cheap cigars and sweat hanging in the air. Around the table sat Hammett, Vic, Ty, and Idy-Reb, their faces lit by the glow of a single overhead bulb. We got 63rd locked down, Demeter began, his voice steady but commanding. Now it's time to move. 61st and 62nd been slipping. Their crews ain't tight like us. We take M, and we take the money that comes with M. Idy-Reb leaned forward, his wild energy barely contained. You want me to run up on M, D? You know I'm with it. Not yet, Demeter said, shaking his head. We don't start with violence. We start with strategy. Ty, you scope out their spots. Vic, you hit up their businesses. Make him see the Trays are better for business. Hammett nodded, already understanding his role. And if they push back? Demeter smirked. That's when we send a message. Taking 61st, the crew moved. Swiftly and deliberately, executing Demeter's plan with precision. Vic started visiting the local shops, his smooth, talking charm convincing shopkeepers that the Trays were the better choice for protection. Most of them agreed without hesitation. The reputation of Demeter's crew had already spread. But not everyone was so easily swayed. A small-time crew on 61st, the Black Hittaz, controlled a stash house that was central to their operation. When Demeter sent Hammett, Ty, and Idy-Reb to negotiate, the Hittaz weren't interested in talking. The meeting took place in an abandoned lot, the air thick with tension. The Hittaz leader, a wiry dude named Snake, sneered at Hammett as he spoke. We ain't bowing down to nobody, least of all some wannabe gangsters from 63rd. Hammett didn't flinch. This ain't about bowing down. It's about business. You let us take over the stash, and you get a cut. Everybody eats. Snake laughed, his crew joining in. Y'all don't run shit here. This is our block. Idy-Reb, already itching for action, stepped forward, his fists clenched. Say that again, nigga. Before Snake could respond, Hammett raised a hand, stopping Idy in his tracks. You sure about this? Hammett asked Snake, his voice calm but deadly. You don't want to end this the easy way? Snake smirked, stepping closer. What you gonna do, tough guy? Hammett's fist connected with Snake's jaw before he could blink, dropping him to the ground like a sack of bricks. The rest of the Hittaz hesitated, their confidence wavering as Hammett stood over their leader. This is what's gonna happen, Hammett said, his voice cutting through the silence. The stash is ours now. Y'all can stick around, but you work for us. You got a problem with that? We settle it right here. The Hittaz, out, reluctantly agreed. By the end of the night, 61st was under Tray control. Internal conflict, Idy-Reb's recklessness as the Trays expanded, cracks began to form within the crew. Idy-Reb's wild nature, once an asset, was becoming a liability. His impulsive actions were drawing unnecessary heat, and Demeter was starting to lose patience. The breaking point came when Idy decided to rob a dice game on 62nd without consulting Demeter. The move disrupted delicate negotiations with a local crew and threatened to unravel everything they had worked for. Demeter called a meeting, his anger barely contained. "Heidi, what the fuck were you thinking?" he demanded. "You out here making moves without telling me?" Heidi leaned back in his chair, shrugging. "They was slipping. Figured I'd teach him a lesson." "You figured wrong," Demeter snapped. "This ain't just about you. You fuck up, it comes back on all of us." Hammett, ever the enforcer, stepped in. "Dee's right. You out of line, Heidi. You keep this up, you might not be around to see how it plays out." Heidi's grin faded, replaced with a flash of defiance. "What you saying, Hammett? You want to step to me?" Hammett didn't flinch. "I'm saying you need to fall in line. Or are you gonna find out what happens when you don't?" The tension in the room was thick, the other crew members holding their breath. Finally, Heidi but the damage was done. The crew had weathered the storm, but the rift between Heidi Reb and the rest of them was growing. Solidifies. With 61st and 62nd under their control, their influence spread like wildfire. The money rolled in, the respect grew, and Demeter's vision was becoming a reality. But success came with a price. Rivals were circling, waiting for a chance to strike. The cops were taking notice, their presence on the block increasing. And within the crew, the cracks were widening. Demeter, Hammett, Vic, Ty, and Heidi Reb stood at the top, but they all knew the climb was far from over. Chapter 4, The Business of Security. Demeter was more than just a street hustler, he was a visionary. While most crews were focused on quick money and reckless violence, Demeter had a long-term plan. He didn't just want to dominate the block, he wanted to own it. And owning the block meant controlling everything that moved on it, especially the businesses. The spark of an idea, it started one night when Demeter, Hammett, and Vic were posted up outside a corner store run by a Middle Eastern family. The store had been there for years, always busy, always turning a profit, but the owners acted like they couldn't stand the neighborhood or the people in it. Demeter watched as kids lined up to buy snacks, their crumpled dollar bills exchanged for overpriced chips and sodas. Meanwhile, the shopkeeper glared at them like they were criminals. "This don't sit right with me," Demeter said, his voice low. "What don't?" Hammett asked, leaning against the car. "These dudes come in our hood, make money off us, but don't give a fuck about us. They lock their doors when we walk in, overcharge us, and look at us like we dirt." Vic nodded, lighting a cigarette. "Yeah, but what you gonna do? That's just how it is." "Not if I got something to say about it," Demeter replied, his eyes narrowing. "They making money off the block? Then they owe the block. They want to stay here, they pay for the privilege." Hammett smirked. "You talking about taxing him?" "Not just taxing," Demeter said. "We offer them security. This block stays hot, stick-ups, fight if that happens to you. It's a win-win." The first pitch, Demeter's first target, was the same corner store they had been watching. Early the next morning, he walked in with Hammett, Vic, and Ty. The shopkeeper, a wiry man in his 40s with a thick accent, immediately stiffened. His eyes darted to the camera behind the counter, then to the baseball bat leaning against the wall. "Can I help you?" the man asked, his tone clipped. "Yeah, you can," Demeter said, his voice calm but firm. "We're here to talk business." "Business?" The shopkeeper frowned. "What business?" Demeter gestured around the store. "You got a nice setup here. Always busy, always making money. But you know how this block gets, a lot of people out here don't respect hard work. Be a shame if something happened to this place." The shopkeeper's eyes widened. "Are you threatening me?" "Nah," Demeter said, shaking his head. "I'm offering you protection. You pay us a small fee, and we make sure nothing happens to your store." No robberies, no fights, no bullshit. The shopkeeper scowled. I don't need protection. You sure about that? Hammett asked, stepping closer. 'Cause the last shop that said they got hit 3 times in 1 week. The tension in the room was thick. Finally, the shopkeeper sighed. How much? 500 a week, Demeter said. We collect every Friday. You good with that? The man hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. Fine. Dealing with resistance not. Every business owner was as cooperative. Some, like Mr. Ali, the owner of a fried chicken joint, pushed back hard. I don't need you boys hanging around my shop, Mr. Ali said, crossing his arms. I've been running this place for 20 years without your help. And how many times you been robbed in those 20 years? Demeter asked, leaning against the counter. That's none of your business. It is now, Demeter said, his tone darkening. We're not here to hurt you, Mr. Ali. We're here to make sure your business stays safe. 500 a week ain't nothing compared to what you could lose. Mr. Ali glared at him, his jaw tightening. If I pay you, you leave me alone? We leave you alone, and we keep everyone else off your back, Demeter said. You ain't gotta like us, but you'll like the results. Mr. Ali reluctantly agreed, and by the end of the week, the Trays had secured 3 more businesses. The racists paid double. Some shopkeepers weren't just resistant, they were outright hostile. One, a Korean liquor store owner named Mr. Chang, refused to even speak to Demeter and the crew. You don't belong here, Mr. Chang snapped when they entered his store. Get out before I call the police. Call them, Idireb said, grinning. See how quick they show up. Demeter raised a hand, signaling Idi to back off. Look, Mr. Chang, we're just here to talk. You want to make money in this neighborhood, you gotta play ball. I don't need your help, Mr. Chang said, his voice dripping with disdain. You people are the problem, not the solution. Hammett's fists clenched, but Demeter stayed calm. You got a lot of nerve talking like that when half your profits come from this block. I don't care where the money comes from, Mr. Chang sneered. I'm not giving it to you. Demeter smiled, but there was no humor in it. We'll see how long you last. That night, Idireb and Ty made sure the liquor store's cameras were conveniently malfunctioning when the windows were smashed. By the next morning, Mr. Chang was calling Demeter, ready to negotiate. You want protection? Demeter said over the phone. It's 1,000 a week now. Building a network over the next few months, the Trays turned their protection business into a well-oiled machine. Vic kept track of the payments, Ty handled surveillance, and Idireb made sure everyone stayed in line. Hammett, as always, was the enforcer, his presence alone enough to keep most shopkeepers from stepping out of line. Some business owners, like Mr. Ali, came to appreciate the arrangement. The block was safer, the money kept flowing, and they didn't have to deal with the usual nonsense. Others, like Mr. Chang, paid begrudgingly, their resentment obvious but ultimately irrelevant. The money from the protection business gave the Trays the resources they needed to expand their operations. They bought better weapons, paid off informants, and started investing in local events to build goodwill with the community. Demeter wasn't just running a gang, he was running an empire. The legacy of control by the time the Trays had secured every major business on 63rd, the block was unrecognizable. The streets were cleaner, the violence was controlled, and the people knew who was in charge. Demeter's vision was coming to life, and the crew was reaping the rewards. But success came with its own set of challenges. Rival crews were taking notice, the cops were sniffing around, and not everyone in the neighborhood appreciated the Trays' methods. The balance of power was shifting, and the stakes were higher than ever. Chapter 5, Territory Lines. With the Trays firmly in control of 63rd, their influence began to spill over into surrounding blocks. Businesses paid their dues, and the streets, for the most part, stayed in line. But success rarely went unnoticed, and rival crews, especially the South Side Hitters, were starting to take issue with how fast Demeter's empire was growing. The Hit-Ass had their own claim on 61st and parts of 62nd, and they weren't about to let the Trays expand without a fight. This was the first real test of the Trays' dominance, and it would determine whether Demeter's vision could survive under fire. The first sparks had started with a minor incident. A corner boy from 62nd who worked for the Hit-Ass tried to strong-arm a bodega owner already under the Trays' protection. Ty, ever watchful, caught wind of it and handled it swiftly. No violence, just a few sharp words and the corner boy scrambling back to his block. But the message was clear. The Hit-Ass weren't respecting the new boundaries. Demeter called a meeting at the barbershop, his face grim as he addressed the crew. The room felt heavier than usual, the air thick with anticipation. "They testing us," Demeter said, his voice low but steady. "They think we soft because we handling business instead of just fighting like animals. We can show 'em we ain't soft real quick," Idy-Reb chimed in, his grin wild. "Just say the word, D." Hammett shook his head. "We don't move reckless. That's how they want us to play. We move smart." Demeter nodded. "Hammett's right. We hit him where it hurts, but we do it on our terms. No warning, no mercy." The Hit on the dice game. The Hit-Ass ran a lucrative dice game on 61st every Friday night, a spot where money changed hands fast and loose. Demeter decided that was where they'd make their move, not just to send a message, but to take something valuable in the process. "Vic," Demeter said, "you scope it out. I want to know how many people, how much money, and who's running the table." Vic nodded, already forming a plan. By the next morning, he had the intel: 8 men, 3 armed, and close to $5,000 in cash circulating. The plan was simple but precise. Ty and Idy-Reb would create a distraction while Hammett and Demeter cleaned out the table. Vic would watch from a distance, ready to signal if reinforcements arrived. The execution the night of the hit, the crew moved like shadows through the alleyways. The sound of laughter and loud talk carried over the fences as the Hit-Ass gathered around the dice game. Ty and Idy-Reb were up first, their job to stir up chaos without tipping anyone off too soon. Ty started by challenging one of the players to a quick side bet, throwing down $100 and pretending to lose his temper when he came up short. "Y'all cheating out here," he yelled, shoving the player. Joe backed him up. "I don't nobody cheat my boy," he shouted, stepping into the circle. The Hit-Ass were distracted just long enough for Hammett and Demeter to make their move. Hammett's first punch dropped one of the armed men before he even realized what was happening. Demeter followed up with brutal efficiency, disarming another and shoving him into a stack of crates. The scene erupted into chaos. Hammett cleared the table, sweeping the cash into a duffel bag while Demeter held the remaining Hit-Ass at bay. Ty and Idy-Reb joined the fray, their wild energy overwhelming the remaining players. By the time the dust settled, the Trays were gone, and the Hit-Ass were left licking their wounds. The retaliation they hit on the dice game was a statement, but it also painted a target on the Trays' backs. The Hit-Ass weren't about to take the loss lying down. 2 days later, a Tray-affiliated corner on 63rd was sprayed with bullets, leaving one of their runners wounded and a clear message scrawled on the side of a building: "This ain't over." Demeter was furious, but he kept his composure. "They want a war," he said during another meeting. "But we're not giving them one. We hit back, but we do it smart." "Smart how?" Idy-Reb asked, his frustration evident. "We cut off their supply," Hammett said, understanding where Demeter was going. "No product, no money, no soldiers." Cutting off the supply, the Hit-Ass relied on a single supply line coming in from the east side, a shipment of drugs and guns that kept their operation running. Demeter decided that was their next target. Vic worked his magic, using his connections to track the shipment to a warehouse on 60th. The crew waited until the shipment arrived, then struck under cover of darkness. Hammett led the charge, his fists doing the kind of damage that left people talking for days. Idy-Reb, for all his wildness, showed surprising precision, taking down armed guards with swift, brutal efficiency. Ty and Vic handled the logistics, making sure the product disappeared while Demeter orchestrated every move like a maestro conducting a symphony. By the time the Hitaz realized what had happened, their supply line was gone, their stash was empty, and their crew was scrambling to recover. The aftermath, the Hitaz, crippled by the loss of their supply, tried to rally, but their leadership fractured under the pressure. Smaller crews began picking apart their territory, and within weeks, their grip on 61st and 62nd was gone. Demeter and the Trays filled the vacuum, taking control of the blocks and solidifying their dominance. But the victory came with a price. The increased attention brought more heat from the cops, and rival crews were beginning to whisper about taking their shot at the new kings of the South Side. The growing tensions within the crew, even as the Trays celebrated their success, the cracks within the crew deepened. Idy Reb, still chafing under Demeter's leadership, began making moves without permission, testing the limits of how far he could push. Hammett, ever the enforcer, pulled Idy aside one night. "You keep this up, and you ain't gonna like where it ends." "You think I'm scared of you, Hammett?" Idy shot back, his wild grin masking a simmering rage. "I've been out here just as long as you. I don't need nobody telling me how to move." Hammett's fist clenched, but he held back. "This ain't about me. It's about the crew. You ain't bigger than the Trays, Idy. Don't forget that." Idy didn't respond, but the look in his eyes said the conflict was far from over. Chapter 6, New Blood, Old Ways. The Trays were riding high after their decisive victory over the Hitaz. They had the streets unlocked, the businesses paying their dues, and the respect of the South Side. But with power came new challenges. A new rival crew, the Iron Fangs, was starting to make noise on the West Side, and their sights were set on 63rd. Meanwhile, unresolved tensions within the Trays were handled behind closed doors, ensuring that loyalty and order were preserved, no matter the cost. Idy Reb's disciplined Demeter wasn't the type to let things slide, but he also understood the importance of unity. And it was time to remind him that the crew came first. The meeting took place in the back room of the barbershop, the air heavy and the blinds were drawn. "Idy," Demeter began, his tone calm but sharp. "You've been family since day one. You've had my back in every fight, and I've had yours. But this shit you've been pulling? It's gotta stop." Idy leaned back in his "Fuck you riding with? Ain't no room for loose cannons here." Idy's grin faded, replaced with a flash of anger. "I ain't no loose cannon. I've done more for this crew than most of y'all." And said, his voice firm. "But loyalty don't mean shit if you can't follow the rules." The room went quiet as Demeter stood, his gaze locked on Idy. "Ty," he said simply. Ty moved quickly, grabbing Idy by the collar and pinning him against the wall. Vic followed, pulling out a small bat from behind his chair. Hammett stood nearby, arms crossed, watching with cold detachment. "We ain't kicking you out, Reb," Demeter said. "But you need to feel this." The discipline was swift and brutal, a series of strikes that left Idy forward and looked him in the eye. "You still my brother," Demeter said. "But don't make me do this again." Idy nodded, his defiance replaced with a quiet understanding. "Idy, I hear you." The rise of the Iron Fangs, while the Trays were dealing with their internal issues, a new threat was brewing on the West Side. The Iron Fangs were a young, hungry crew led by a ruthless leader named Grizz, a towering man with a reputation for violence and a thirst for power. Unlike the Hitaz, the Fangs weren't content to hold their own territory, they wanted it all. The first sign like a madman. Hammett squared off against Grizz. The two men trading blows in the center of the room. Grizz was strong, his punches heavy, but Hammett was faster, his years as the Trey's enforcer giving him the edge. With a well-placed uppercut, Hammett sent Grizz crashing to the ground. "Tell your boys to back off," Hammett growled, standing over him. "Or next time, you ain't walking out." Grizz wiped the blood from his mouth, his smirk returning. "This ain't over." Strategic moves after the brawl, Demeter knew the Fangs wouldn't stop until they were dealt with permanently. But he also knew a full-scale war would bring too much heat from the cops. Instead, he decided to cut the Fangs off at the knees. Vic was tasked with gathering intel, using his network of informants to map out the Fangs' operations. Within days, they had a plan: hit their supply lines, disrupt their business, and force them out of the game. "We don't just beat them," Demeter said during the planning session. "We break them." The supply line raid the Trey struck at dawn, targeting a delivery truck loaded with guns and cash meant for the Fangs. Hammett led the operation, his crew moving with precision. They blocked the truck at an intersection, overwhelming the driver and his guards before disappearing with the cargo. By the time the Fangs realized what had happened, their entire operation was in disarray. The aftermath: the Iron Fangs, unable to recover from the loss of their supply line, began to fracture. Grizz tried to hold them together, but dissent spread like wildfire. Within weeks, the crew splintered, their territory swallowed up by the Treys and other opportunistic gangs. Demeter stood on the corner of 63rd, watching as the block returned to normal. "Another one down," he said quietly. Hammett nodded beside him. "And more to come." 1. Consolidating power post Fangs. The fall of the Iron Fangs was both a victory and an opportunity. With the Fangs out of the picture, the Treys quickly moved to fill the void, claiming the abandoned territory on 61st and 62nd. Demeter, ever the strategist, wasted no time setting up new operations. The takeover: Demeter, Hammett, and Tyke stood on the corner of 62nd, surveying the block. The old Iron Fangs tags were still visible on the walls, but the streets felt different. The fear that once gripped the area had faded, replaced with cautious curiosity. "We'll start with the businesses," Demeter said. "Get them under our protection. Then we lock down the corners." Hammett nodded, his eyes scanning for potential threats. "You think any of these small crews gonna try to step up?" "Let 'em try," Demeter replied. We'll handle it. Their first stop was a bodega owned by a Dominican family. The shopkeeper, wary but pragmatic, agreed to pay the protection fee after Hammett assured him the trays would keep the block safe. We're not the Fangs, Hammett said. You pay us, and we make sure nobody messes with you. That's a promise. Rival crews testing boundaries, not everyone was eager to bow to the trays. Smaller crews, seeing the power vacuum left by the Fangs, began testing the trays' limits. One crew, the Brick Boys, tried to muscle in on a corner already under tray control. Hammett led the response, bringing ID-Reb and Ty with him. The confrontation was quick and decisive. Hammett's presence alone was enough to send most of the Brick Boys running. The few who stayed behind learned the hard way that the trays didn't play. You step on our block again, Hammett growled, standing over one of the crew's leaders, and you ain't walking away. 2. Internal dynamics. As the trays grew, so did the challenges of managing their operations. The crew was stretched thin, with each member taking on new responsibilities. ID-Reb's redemption, still recovering from his discipline, was determined to prove his loyalty. He started taking on smaller tasks, running collections, and handling low-level disputes with precision. His wild energy, once a liability, became an asset under Hammett's guidance. I ain't trying to mess up no more, ID told Hammett one night. I just want to show D I'm still down. Then keep doing what you're doing, Hammett replied. Stay focused and utilize logistics. Vic and Ty, meanwhile, worked tirelessly to manage the growing logistical demands of the operation. Vic handled the money, keeping meticulous records of who paid and who didn't. Ty coordinated the crew's movements, ensuring that every corner was covered and every shipment was secure. We're moving fast, Ty said during a late-night meeting with Demeter. Too fast. We need to slow down before we overextend. Demeter nodded. You're right. Let's consolidate what we got before we push any further. 3. Law enforcement tensions. The tray's success didn't go unnoticed by the authorities. Increased police patrols on 63rd made it harder to operate, and a new detective, Detective Harris, made it his personal mission to bring down the crew. Detective Harris's campaign. Harris was relentless, orchestrating raids on suspected stash houses and harassing tray members at every opportunity. His tactics were aggressive, bordering on harassment, but they were effective. They on our ass heavy, Hammett said during a meeting at the barbershop. Harris ain't playing. Demeter frowned, his mind racing. We need to tighten up. Move the stash spots, keep our people low-key, and find out everything we can about Harris. The raid one night, a stash house on 64th was hit by Harris and his team. The raid was a blow to the trays, costing them thousands in cash and product. Demeter took it personally, vowing to find out who tipped off the cops. We got a rat, Demeter said, his voice low and dangerous. And we ain't stopping till we find relationships. The tray's relationship with the community was complicated. Some residents appreciated the order they brought to the block, while others saw them as a plague. The community project. In an effort to improve their image, Demeter started a community project, funding the renovation of the local rec center. The move earned him some goodwill, but it also drew criticism from residents who saw it as a front for their illegal activities. This don't erase what y'all doing out here, one elder said during a meeting. You can't buy respect. Demeter nodded, his expression unreadable. We ain't trying to buy respect. We just trying to give back. The pushback. Not everyone was willing to accept the tray's help. A local preacher, Reverend Carter, openly condemned them, calling them a cancer on the community. His sermons drew attention, both from residents and the cops. You think he's a problem? Hammett asked Demeter after one particularly heated sermon. He's loud, Demeter replied. But he ain't no threat. Let him talk. 5. The cost of power. As the trays solidified their control, the cracks in their foundation began to show. The pressure of maintaining their empire weighed heavily on everyone, especially Demeter. Moral dilemmas: the crew faced tough decisions as they balanced their business with the community's needs. One night, a single mother approached Hammett, begging for a break on her protection fee. "I'm just trying to feed my kids," she said, tears streaming down her face. Hammett hesitated, then slipped her the money out of his own pocket. "You good for now," he said. "But don't let it happen again." Regrouping after the raid on 64th forced the Trays to regroup. Demeter called an emergency meeting, his frustration evident. "We're slipping," he said. "We need to tighten up. No more mistakes, no more leaks. We keep moving, but we move smart." The crew nodded, their resolve renewed. Despite the setbacks, the Trays were determined to hold onto their crown. Chapter 8: Hunting Shadows. The Trays were on high alert. Detective Harris, with his relentless focus on taking down the crew, had disrupted their operations, forcing them to adapt or risk collapse. At the same time, the remnants of the Iron Fangs began regrouping, forming a new rival crew, the Steel Wolves, under a brutal and cunning leader named Cyrus Wolf James. These parallel threats forced Demeter and Hammett to confront enemies on all fronts while holding their empire together. 1. Detective Harris's escalating tactics. Detective Harris wasn't like the other cops who rolled through 63rd. He wasn't interested in shaking people down for pocket money or turning a blind eye for a cut. Harris was a different breed, calculated, methodical, and with a personal vendetta against crews like the Trays. Surveillance and pressure. Harris started small, setting up surveillance on known Tray hangouts. He posted unmarked cars near the barbershop, watched their stash houses, and tailed key members of the crew. The pressure was unrelenting, designed to make the Trays slip up. "Every move we make, he's there," Hammett said during a meeting. "We can't even blink without him sniffing around." Demeter nodded, his jaw tight. "He's playing chess. So we play smarter. Move everything underground, no more open stash spots, no more street meets. And find out what makes him tick. Everyone's got a weakness." The raid on the warehouse. Harris scored his biggest win yet when he raided a warehouse the Trays had been using to store weapons. The operation was swift and surgical, leaving the crew scrambling to recover. Hammett, furious, slammed his fist on the barbershop table after the news broke. "How the fuck he find out about that spot?" Vic, ever the voice of reason, leaned back in his chair. "Either someone's talking, or he's got tech we ain't ready for." "Both," Demeter said, his voice low. "We need to move quieter. And we need to send him a message." The setup. Demeter devised a plan to turn Harris's aggression against him. Using false intel leaked through a trusted intermediary, they led Harris to believe a major drug shipment was coming through an abandoned factory on 65th. When Harris, they found nothing but empty crates and graffiti mocking them. "Try again, detective." The move bought the Trays some breathing room, but Harris wasn't deterred. If anything, it only fueled his obsession. 2. The rise of the Steel Wolves. The fall of the Iron Fangs had left a power vacuum, and Cyrus Wolf James was more than ready to fill it. A former lieutenant in the Fangs, Wolf had survived their collapse by staying in the shadows, biding his time. Now, with a core group of loyal followers, he was rebuilding under a new banner, the Steel Wolves. A ruthless leader. Wolf wasn't interested in following the same mistakes that had doomed the Fangs. Where Grizz had been brash and impulsive, Wolf was calculating and cruel. He ruled through fear, keeping his crew in line with a combination of loyalty and brutal enforcement. "He's like a snake," Ty said during a meeting. "He strikes when you least expect it." "And he don't care about the block," Vic added. "He just wants to burn everything." The first strike. The Steel Wolves announced their presence with a brazen attack on one of the Tray's corners. A group of Tray-affiliated runners was ambushed late at night, their stash stolen and their leader left beaten in the street. When word reached Demeter, he called an emergency meeting. "They want war," he said, his tone cold. "So we give it to them. But we do it on our terms." Recon and retaliation. Hammett and Tide led a small team to gather intel on the Wolves. They staked out their hangouts, noting their numbers, routines, and weak points. The wolves, thinking they had the upper hand, didn't bother hiding their movements. A week later, the Trays struck back. Hammett and Idy Reb led the charge, hitting a wolf stash house in a lightning-fast raid. The wolves were caught off guard, their stash wiped out and their crew scattered. Send this message to Wolf, Hammett growled to one of the captured wolves. 63rd ain't for sale. 3. The collision of threats, the combined pressure of Harris and the Steel Wolves began taking its toll on the Trays. Every move they made felt like a gamble, and the weight of maintaining their empire was becoming heavier by the day. Hammett's tension. Hammett felt the strain more than most. As the enforcer, he was on the front lines of every conflict, his fists doing the talking when words failed. But the constant fighting was wearing him down, and cracks in his usually unshakable demeanor began to show. One night, as he sat in the barbershop with Demeter, he let his guard down. We're fighting on two fronts, D. Feels like no matter how much we win, they just keep coming. Demeter nodded, his expression unreadable. That's the game, Hammett. We either keep playing, or we fold. And folding ain't in my blood. The wolf strike back. Wolf, furious over the raid on his stash house, retaliated with a coordinated attack on multiple Tray corners. The violence was brutal and indiscriminate, leaving several Tray soldiers wounded. They ain't playing no more, Idy Reb said, pacing the barbershop. They coming for blood. And we give it to M, Hammett replied, his voice hard. But we do it smart. A new alliance? In a surprising twist, a third crew, the Southside Syndicate, approached Demeter with an offer, join forces to take out the wolves. They're a problem for all of us, the Syndicate's leader said. We take them out together, or we all fall. Demeter, ever cautious, considered the offer carefully. We'll talk, he said. But if I smell a double cross, it's over. Chapter 9, Alliances and Endgames. With threats closing in from all sides, Demeter and the Trays faced two critical decisions, whether to trust the Southside Syndicate in a tenuous alliance against the Steel Wolves, and how to handle Detective Harris, whose relentless pursuit had disrupted their entire operation. Both challenges demanded precision, strategy, and the willingness to take risks that could define their future or destroy them entirely. 1. The Southside Syndicate Alliance. The Southside Syndicate had a reputation for being ruthless but business-minded. Led by Cortez Tez Holloway, they controlled a significant portion of the East Side and were known for their high-level connections, including ties to corrupt officials. Unlike the Steel Wolves, the Syndicate wasn't interested in chaos. They wanted control, stability, and profits. The barbershop was silent as Demeter, Hammett, and Vic prepared to meet Tez and his top lieutenants. The tension was palpable. Alliances in the streets were always fragile, and one wrong word could turn the meeting into a bloodbath. Tez arrived with two men, Mace, a towering enforcer with a mean streak, and Silk, a slick-talking negotiator who seemed to size up the room with every glance. Appreciate y'all agreeing to meet, Tez said, his tone calm but assertive. Let's cut the bullshit. We both got problems with Wolf and his mutts. We handle them together, and we both come out stronger. Demeter leaned back in his chair, studying Tez. What's in it for you? Tez smirked. What's in it for both of us is peace. You keep the South Side, we keep the East Side. No beef, no overlap. And if we take Wolf out and you decide to push past the East Side? Hammett asked, his tone cold. Tez's smile faded. That won't happen. But if it does, I'm sure you'll remind me why that's a bad idea. The room went quiet as the two leaders stared each other down. Finally, Demeter nodded. We'll play ball, for now. But one double cross, and it's over. Planning the attack the Alliance was uneasy but effective. The Syndicate brought intelligence on the Wolves' movements, while the Trays supplied manpower and strategy. Together, they planned a coordinated strike on the Wolves' main stash house, a fortified location that served as their base of operations. Hit him fast and hard, Tez said during a joint strategy meeting. No survivors, no loose ends. Demeter glanced at Hammett, who nodded. We're in. 2. The assault on the wolves. The operation was set for midnight. The syndicate and the Trays moved in silence, their combined force of 30 men surrounding the stash house. Hammett led the charge, his presence steadying the younger soldiers. The battle the wolves, caught off guard, scrambled to defend their territory. Gunfire lit up the night, the air filled with the deafening roar of bullets and shouts. Hammett moved like a force of nature, his fists and gun clearing paths. Through the chaos, Idy Rib, seeking redemption, fought with a fury that bordered on reckless, taking down 2 wolves single-grouping with Hammett. In the heart of the fight, Demeter and Tez stormed the upper floors, where Wolf himself was waiting. The showdown was brutal. Wolf was a brawler, his raw strength making him a dangerous opponent. But Demeter's precision and Tez's ruthless efficiency proved too much. Within minutes, Wolf was on the ground, bleeding and broken. This your king? Demeter asked, standing over him. Not anymore. With Wolf's death, the Steel Wolves disbanded, their remaining members either fleeing or pledging loyalty to the Trays and Syndicate. Aftermath of the alliance. Back at the barber shop, the Trays celebrated their victory, but Demeter remained cautious. We ain't out of the woods yet, he told Hammett. Tez is a businessman, but he's still a wolf in sheep's clothing. We watch him. 3. Dealing with Detective Harris. While the alliance with the Syndicate handled one threat, Detective Harris was still a major problem. His focus on the Trays had only intensified, and his tactics were becoming more aggressive. Finding Harris's weakness, Vic, always the strategist, started digging into Harris's past. After weeks of research and calling in favors, he found what they needed. Harris had a gambling problem. A big one. He owed money to the wrong people, and the debt was piling up. We can use this, Vic said during a meeting. Get the right leverage, and we make him back off. Demeter nodded. Do it. The leverage. Vic and Hammett arranged a meeting with one of Harris's creditors, a loan shark named Big Tony. The negotiation was quick. Tony was more than willing to sell Harris's debt in exchange for a payout. With the debt in their hands, the Trays made their move. Hammett and Idy Rib cornered Harris outside his favorite bar one night, catching him off guard. Detective, Hammett said, his voice calm but menacing. We need to talk. Harris tried to act tough, but the sight of Idy cracking his knuckles made him hesitate. What do you want? We own your debt now, Hammett said, handing him a folder. You owe us. And what we want is simple, back off. Harris's face paled as he flipped through the papers. You think you can scare me into stopping? Hammett leaned in close. We ain't scaring you. We're giving you a choice. You keep pushing, and your problems get a lot worse. The fallout. Harris, unwilling to risk his career and safety, began pulling back. The raid stopped, the surveillance eased, and the pressure on the Trays lessened. It wasn't a permanent solution, but it bought them time. 4. The cost of victory. The Trays had survived 2 major threats, but the battles left scars. The alliance with the Syndicate was uneasy, the law enforcement heat hadn't fully gone away, and the community's perception of the crew remained divided. Demeter's reflection sitting in the barbershop late one night, Demeter looked around at his crew, Hammett, Vic, Ty, Idy Rib. They had built something powerful, but the cost was weighing on him. We keep winning, he said quietly. But it don't feel like we're getting ahead. Hammett nodded. That's the game, D. We just gotta keep playing. Chapter 10. The blueprint for power. With their immediate threats neutralized, Demeter and the Trays turned control. 63rd.
What up, dog? We back. Make sure y'all go get that.
What's that?
Oh, mama. Shit. Chilling. I was letting my book play while we was in the Telegram. I was listening to Telegram in my ear, letting the book play.
Yes, sir.
What it do? What it do? What it do? Heck yeah. Those are nice telegrams.
Yes, Lord. I understand and
Get in
unfold.
there before they miss out. Yeah.
Shit, what's happening?
King, not too much. Midwest.
What up, Dip?
Not too much. Can't complain.
We all gonna have to now because I'm tired of talking.
Yeah, it is time for everybody to get that shit done, though. Instead of saying that shit, motherfuckers need to be moving. Because we've been like, believe it or not, it's like it's going to be a time where, okay, we moving on, we moving forward.
Got to. And now you see why.
Can't keep sitting waiting on motherfuckers to decide on if they want to make this next move or make the next step. That's all, that's on you. When you ready, hopefully I'll be around. You know what I'm saying? Get you together. That's all I like to say.
We
Because y'all see the results.
indeed.
We really ain't got to say much. Actions speak louder than words, and all we've been showing is results.
Yep. It's not even a question whether it's real or accurate.
And then,
It's not
how
even
many people have y'all seen come back after taking the class or a workshop and say, "Oh man, this is some bullshit. I wasted my money. I'll wait." I ain't gonna hold my breath, but I'll wait. Straight up. Nobody. Not one client. What up, dog? Taking her with you. Bye, princess. Bye bye. Yeah. I ain't hear one. I heard people in there like, holy shit. This, that, and the third, but other than that, all the clients been satisfied.
Yes,
I mean,
Lord.
they was taught some things. I don't know how many people paid attention when they were doing whatever they were doing. Maybe a lot of people just caught on and just, moving forward. But it would be nice to see, some new faces in there, some new familiar faces. You know what I'm saying? Or some new faces. I got some people that when they get their money together, they will be joining the Telegram, starting a bill pay situation. So once they get their funds together, they're gonna hit me up.
Yes, Lord.
Same thing y'all need to do. Don't be shy and all that shit. We gotta do it. We gotta do what we gotta do. My email address is right there, going across the bottom. Y'all can grab that. Email me. You got any questions? We'll get you together. Yes, Lord. We will get you together. And you best believe. You better believe it. Straight up. You better believe it. Yes, Lord. I'm gonna get ready to get off here because Telegram was long as hell. And I have been on here an hour and 10 minutes. You know, shit. Woo. It's time to, kick back, wind down a little bit. You feel me? But make sure y'all share this live with y'all people. Let them check out, you know what I'm saying, that book. Make sure y'all go grab that book. It's on Amazon, Kindle, King of the Trades, on Mamas. And if you ain't got Emerging from the Barrel, A Journey Beyond the Rabbit Hole, go grab that motherfucker too. On Mamas. Straight up. That being said, peace and love, y'all. Peace and love, y'all. On Mamas.
Peace and love, baby. Peace.
Guide the financial freedom and correcting your status in the system. Midwest EDU focuses on educating individuals about practical steps like managing debt, building savings and investing strategically. Key principles include financial jewels like trusts, bonds, and legal instruments to protect and grow assets. Correcting your status in the system. This involves reclaiming your legal and financial identity within governmental and financial systems. Understanding your legal status, correct legal documents like birth certificates and social security to align with your preferred status. Attend workshops, read relevant materials, and network with like-minded individuals. Assess your current standing, understand your debt, credit status, and legal documentation. Take action. Start correcting your status through affidavits, trust formations, or AIP applications while building a financial foundation. Plan for long-term freedom, focus on investments, business ventures, and creating generational wealth. Midwest EDU's approach empowers individuals to break free from financial and legal constraints, ensuring they live a life aligned with their goals and values.